Hi, I'm Max Keiser. This is the Keiser Report. I finally made it to the House of Commons to give David Cameron a piece of my mind, Stacy Herbert.
Yes, indeed. Max Keiser, David Cameron gets STFU'd by Max Keiser.
And to the lawless minority, the criminals who have taken what they can get, I say this. We will track you down, we will find you, we will charge you, we will punish you. You will pay for what you have done.
STFU. STFU, David Cameron, because you're completely off base here. You are a total product of an elitist school of banking schmucks. Here it's blatantly obvious that your own bankers are financially raping your people. Right up there, Cameron! And I'll be in London soon enough. You know, we just got back from Ireland. We're doing our world tour to visit all the hot spots around the world as we push back against the criminal banking class, warming up for the Great Inquisition part numero 0012. Yeah, impale them, put their heads on spikes. Looking forward to it. What else?
Well, speaking of the global financial nincompoops, they, of course, were meeting down in Nice last week. And one of the talks to emerge was in this next headline, Bundesbank. Central bank reserves will not help fund EFSF. So G20 leaders in Cannes discussed the idea that the European system of central banks could pawn their total foreign exchange reserves of 50 to 60 billion euros to a trust of the European Crisis Fund in the form of special drawing rights from the International Monetary Fund.
Gold is in play. This is what we've been warning you about for a long, long time, that gold is going to be in play. Now it's definitely in play because all of the banks with all of these debts, when you add them all up, you realize that all of the banks are insolvent. The counterparty risk, as it's called, doesn't exist because there is no possibility of any of these counterparties making good on any of these bets. There's only one currency in the world without a counterparty risk. That's gold. It's in play. Now people want Germany's gold, but of course most of it's in New York, and the gold thing continues, as we've been telling you.
Now the Bundesbank itself said regarding this plan for Germany to pawn $15 billion worth of Germans' gold, he said, "We know this plan and we reject it."
Good luck. Good luck rejecting it. It's 60% held in New York. And you're not allowed to have a military after we crushed you after World War II. So good luck with that, Germany. Luck, 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 luck.
Well, you did pre-warn them in 2009. You were in Frankfurt, and here's a little clip of you there telling them exactly this plan.
Don't do it, German people. Hold on to your gold. Gold has value. The U.S. dollar has no value. It's the devil's currency. Hold on to your gold, German people.
As you see, Max, nobody was listening to you. They should have.
No, I mean, when central banks were net sellers of gold, including the Federal Reserve Bank and Bank of England, that's when Germany should have said, oh, by the way, give us back our gold. But now that gold's in play and all the global banks are collapsing, it's too late. You screwed up, Germany. No gold for you, buddy.
Okay, well, at least, Max, Germany is not a serious debtor like Italy. Eurozone crisis, Italian borrowing costs soar to bail out territory. So we know Italian debt is at $2.6 trillion, which dwarfs that of Greece. And the yield on the Italian 10-year bond went up to 6.66%. As you can see from this chart, it spiked.
Right. Italy is now going to take the hot seat away from Greece, who took the hot seat away from Ireland. But the whole crisis will revisit Ireland again. They just found an incredible new unrealized liability in their bank's balance sheet that will require another bailout in Ireland and more austerity measures. Speaking of Ireland, Stacey, I was just in Limerick at Limerick University. They gave me this award, the Limerick University Debating Team. This is for contributions to financial journalism. What does it say, Stacey?
It says honorary life membership accorded to Max Keiser for his contribution to debate and discourse. They must have seen your discourse at the dispatch box with David Cameron.
Yes, well, the contributions I made apparently to the art of discourse and debating is my use of props.
Oh, that's true.
They love the props. And they like props like this. Like here's a €50 roll of toilet currency. All of your 50-euro toilet paper currency will soon be about as valuable as this toilet paper. Except this is all available and nightly printed up in this beautiful display case that you can show in your house and tell your kids all about what happened in Europe at the end of the beginning when it was all turned into one big pile of feces.
Now, regarding Italy, Max, Faisal Islam, who is the economics editor for Channel 4 News in the UK, I said it a fortnight ago, EFSF equals end for Silvio's fiefdom. Germany will not create Italy-sized bazooka for use by Berlusconi. Now, remember, Germany has a lot of say in what happens in the Eurozone, particularly when it comes to monetary or any fiscal policy. And now, remember, Silvio Berlusconi, in the investigation into one of the various crimes he's involved with, the phone transcripts from his conversation with a journalist said that he had called German Chancellor Angela Merkel an unbelievable lard. So it's coming back to bite him now.
Well, this is the amazing thing, because ultimately they're going to fight World War III in Europe and around the world as part of the currency war. And we'll be talking about that with James Rickards after the break. But it's already started. Europe is now in a war. They're conducting a currency war. And Germany can always pull out of the euro completely, but it'll be a reunified Germany with 3,000 tons of gold. Oh, yeah, that's right. That's the whole point of it, wasn't it?
Well, speaking of the gold, okay, now Angela Merkel's party suggested Italian gold sale raised by CDU lawmaker Rheinische Post says. So Italy, according to Gunther Grickbaum, a lawmaker in German Chancellor Angela Merkel's party, says Italy could lower its debt by selling gold reserves. So this is, again, over and over we see this brought up in this European debt crisis, that somebody should get rid of their gold. And now they're trying to use this as a weapon. They're accusing each other that they have to get rid of their gold. Take his gold, take their gold.
Right. Italy has, 2,700 tons of gold. It's a really big position. And I make this prediction. China never really came to the aid of Greece. They have not come to the aid of anyone in the Eurozone, but they will come to the aid of Italy in exchange for gold. I make that prediction. But before we're on next week, that will be definitely in play. China to aid Italy for gold.
According to the CNBC chart from September, Italy's gold reserves were the fourth largest in the world. They held 2,701 tons, which was valued at $157 billion. Now, if you add that into the $2.6 trillion in debt, that means that gold would have to be revalued to between $25,000 and $30,000 an ounce to clear their debts completely. And I think that's something that you and Jim Rickards have come up with as a number.
Yeah, that's where gold is headed, to clear the global debts. It's going to be north of $20,000 old dollars an ounce. But the thing about China and Italy is that China will come in, and before the IMF sinks their claws into Italy and gets them to sign a memorandum giving away their constitutional rights, as they did with Ireland and as they did with Greece, Italy will preempt the IMF and they'll do a deal directly, bilateral deal with China. I predict it. You'll see this is going to happen.
But speaking of buffoons, Max, let's move on to this. Traders from Chicago Board of Trade dump McDonald's applications on Occupy Chicago protesters. So last week, in the middle of an Occupy Chicago teach-in, traders at the Chicago Board of Trade dumped employment applications for McDonald's on the protesters. Now, to let people know what the Chicago Board of Trade is, I looked it up on Wikipedia, and they say it was established in 1848 as the world's oldest futures and options exchange. Now, in 2007, it merged with the Chicago Mercantile Exchange to form the CME Group.
Yeah, and the CME Group is also the largest regulator of the futures markets in the U.S., but it's also the largest player in the futures markets in the U.S., and they fall under the heading of self-regulated body that conducts business according to the rules that they themselves regulating themselves. And what we know about the CME is that they've been caught now several times breaking the law. And the CBOE, the Chicago Board of Options Exchange, and the Chicago Board of Futures Exchange, they're at the heart of the fraudulent derivatives trading and at the fraudulent trading that goes on every single day, the law breaking that goes on. But the CME, for example, tell them more about this. It's really shocking.
Well, we're going to move on to this headline. So they're saying to the protesters, get a job, but they can't even do their job. MF Global customers say money safeguards failed them. CME Group, the world's largest futures exchange, is responsible for auditing its clearing members, such as MF Global, under its authority as a self-regulating organization. Now, CME Group is losing the trust of investors, according to this article in Bloomberg Businessweek, who uses the exchange and expect their money to be protected, said a trader with $500,000 in an MF Global account that has been frozen since October 31st and who asked not to be named because he fears reprisals. He also said that CME Group told him to expect not to get his money back for years as it's held up in litigation.
Well, when you do business with the commodity markets in Chicago, regulated by the CME Group, and you give them your money to be investing in various accounts, they put that money in their own pocket, and then they put up a set of false accounts to the regulators that they themselves regulate. And that's how they base their quarterly performance numbers, and their filings is based on a completely fictitious reports. They falsify accounts. They commit massive fraud. They commit massive counterfeiting.
This is the closest to a Marie Antoinette moment we've had, because it was the royal family of France that caused the country to be bankrupt at the time. And perhaps Marie Antoinette thought she wasn't taunting the population intentionally like these guys are.
Yeah.
But these guys at this derivatives exchange, the largest derivatives market in the world, they are responsible more than almost anybody else for the global financial crisis that we see before us.
Yeah, the only question is, where can I go to start an insurrection? So, I mean, is it Chicago? Is it Greece? I'm thinking Belfast, because you know, they know what it takes to start an insurrection. And I'm getting a lot of requests to go up to Belfast to start a new country called the Independent Republic of Max Keiser. And we're going to go after the banksters. So Belfast, I'm coming into your town soon.
Are you going to declare this in Parliament when you do go speak to David Cameron again?
There won't be any Parliament left by the time I get there. I'm pursuing a scorched earth policy ahead of when I arrive. That's how bad I am. All right, Stacy Herbert, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
Don't go away. After the break, I'll be talking with Currency Wars writer James Rickards.
Observe nature and discover its beauty. Communicate with the wild and learn. Test yourself and become free. See what nature can give you on RT.
Hi, I'm Max Keiser. Welcome back to the Keiser Report. Don't walk, run to your nearest Kindle and pick up a copy of this book, Currency Wars. This is the Rosetta Stone of the entire financial situation. Confused? Don't be. Read this book. Let's talk to the author, James G. Rickards. Jim, welcome to the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max. Thanks for inviting me.
All right, Jim Rickards, your book is very timely with the suggestion emerging from the G20 that German gold reserves should be pawned to the EFSF in order to increase the leverage available to the fund. Explain what's happening here in regards to the currency wars.
Well, Max, as we said all along, and as I say in the book, you know, currency wars are about competing devaluation. So the Fed and the Treasury have been working very hard to cheapen the dollar, really trash the dollar relative to China and Europe. But China does not want a strong currency either because they want to promote exports, and Europe has the same problem. That's the essence of currency wars. Not everybody can cheapen all at once. Somebody's got to win and somebody's got to lose. Right now, by the way, the big loser is Europe because the euro is very strong. A lot of people are surprised at that. They've heard, Europe's falling apart, it's in crisis, these sovereign bonds are, trash, etc. But the problem is China and the U.S. both want a strong euro because they want to sell their goods to Europe. Europe's a larger export market for China than the United States is. So if China and the U.S. want a strong euro, you're going to get a strong euro, and Germany's on board with that. So that really explains that conundrum. But at the end of the day, not everyone can win a currency war unless you go to gold. Gold is the one thing where everybody can devalue at once against gold. They can't devalue against each other, but they can devalue against gold. So that's where these things end up. But there's a joker in the deck, Max. The joker is the SDR. I know it makes people's head hurt, but it's the special drawing right. The easiest way to think of it, this is the IMF printing press. The Fed has a printing press, they crank out dollars. The ECB has a printing press, they crank out euros. And known to very few people, the IMF has a printing press and they crank out SDRs. So I see the entire international monetary system as a foot race between SDRs and gold because those are the only things left.
Hey, I want to repeat that point because it is quite critical going forward, especially in your thesis as you laid out in Currency Wars. The ECB can print euros, the Fed can print dollars, and the IMF can print these SDRs, which is another fiat currency, global currency. Now, in response to the suggestion about the selling or collateralization of Germany's gold, Germany countered with a suggestion that instead they suggest that Italy should sell their gold to pay down the debt. Now, of course, Italy's got a big gold position in all of this. Just to walk us through that little counter response from Italy and their position in the gold right now.
I've actually studied the entire world in gold space, and what I mean by that, people, geostrategists study the world in oil space. They say, who's got the oil, who needs the oil, what are the choke points like the Straits of Hormuz, how is it shipped, etc. Well, think of the world in gold space and ask yourself, who has the gold, who needs the gold, and where does it come from? And it's a very revealing picture. The gold superpowers in the world are actually the United States and Europe. They may be trying to trash their paper currencies, but the U.S. is 8,000 tons. The Euro system as a whole, all 16 members have 10,000 tons. So that's what the pushing and shoving is about. But there's one big problem, which is that gold that we just talked about is not in Europe. It's in New York. It's about half a mile from where I'm sitting. I'm doing the interview for New York, and it's in the basement of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. And good luck to the Europeans trying to get it back. I mean, the problem with all this gold pledging is the gold's actually in New York, and the U.S. is in a position to confiscate it when the time comes.
All right, Jim, I wanted to spend some time now on in the book Currency Wars. This is just out this week, your book. In the first couple of chapters, you go through an actual Pentagon-sponsored exercise of a currency war, and these chapters read like a thriller. This is a fantastic read, as well as being incredibly informative. But you were participating in the Pentagon's exercise of a currency war, and I'd like you to summarize those first couple of chapters for viewers, because I really think they need to understand that this term currency war is not just a metaphor. This is really happening. Walk us through it.
Sure, that's correct. This was what you're describing, Max, and it is the first two chapters of the book. It's the first ever financial war game conducted by the Pentagon. Now, the Pentagon has conducted war games forever, and they're very, there's the red team and the blue team, kind of bad guys and good guys, and they do these all the time, and there's certain centers where these are conducted. But this is the Pentagon decided in 2009 that they should do a financial war game to see what that would look like. It was conducted at a top secret weapons laboratory halfway between Washington and Baltimore called the Applied Physics Laboratory, but it was the first time they had ever done finance, so I was actually invited in as an expert consultant on how to write the rules of the game. And they knew how to use aircraft carriers and B-2 bombers and amphibious invasions, but no one knew how to use stocks, bonds, and derivatives to fight a war. So the rules were you could not use any kinetic weapons, means nothing that would shoot or explode. You could only use stocks, bonds, currencies, and derivatives. And we had teams. There was a Russia team, a China team, a United States team, and then we had sort of Europe and Switzerland, the hedge funds all lumped in together. And then there were referees. So we were given certain scenarios. You would make a move. You would announce it. The other teams would react. We had separate rooms for our capital, so we could go back. I was on the China team, so we went back to Beijing, which was a certain room that was our capital. And we played it over 2 days, and it was fascinating. My object was to, in order to help the United States, I actually wanted to attack the United States as hard as we could in order to teach our own military and intelligence community what the threats were. You're trying to help America by showing the vulnerabilities of America. So that's what we did. And I actually cooked up a little plot with a friend of mine who was on the Russia team, and China and Russia combined forces and combined their gold and announced a new gold-backed currency using UK banks and Swiss depositories. And what they said is, from now on, if you want Chinese exports or Russian natural resources, we will no longer accept dollars. You must pay us in this new gold-backed currency that we sponsor, as a way to kind of get the United States to, to think hard about the vulnerabilities of the dollar. It was a fascinating exercise. It's all described in the book. I hope the readers enjoy it. But it was a deadly serious gambit by the Pentagon to understand how financial war could play out.
You also mentioned, I want to talk about a tweet that you've left in the last day or so, again on the special drawing rights. You said, you tweeted that the G20 will go to the special drawing right before they go to gold, and then gold is the last resort. Walk us through that, Jim.
Sure. I mean, the thing is, central banks and the international monetary elite, represented by the G20 leaders, the IMF, and then the central bank heads and finance ministers around the world, just to be clear, they hate gold. Now, they have it. The U.S. has not sold any gold since 1980, and Europe's been holding on to their gold. So the people with gold are hanging on to it, but they actually hate it. They would prefer fiat currency because they can manipulate expectations, they can manipulate people. People who are kind of in on the game can hedge themselves with, things like gold, land, fine art, other types of hard assets. Warren Buffett bought a railroad. That's the ultimate hard asset. So the insiders can protect themselves. The people who lose are average citizens. So people saving in a bank account, people with retirement savings, annuities, insurance policies, anything that's sort of denominated in nominal dollars that's not going to go up with inflation, they're the victims. So this is a sort of organized theft from taking money from average people, giving it to the elites who know how the game is played. So that's why they like paper money. And when they get over indebted, which they are now, Europe cannot pay its debt. There's not enough money in the world to fill the hole in the European balance sheet. But what you can do is print some SDRs and hand them out, just like candy at Halloween. Here comes China, here comes Italy, here comes France. Here's some SDRs, kids, and go have a good time. That's actually it sounds like I'm being frivolous, Max. I'm being very serious. That is how SDRs work. They're not backed up by anything. They are handed out by the IMF. They do count as reserves. When the SDRs came out in the late 60s and the 70s, they were actually called paper gold. Now, that's one of the great oxymorons of all time, but that was the nickname for them when they came out. They were called paper gold. So that would be the elite's preferred route. But my view is that you'll be able to keep it going a little longer with SDRs, but eventually it will go critical. People will lose confidence across the board. At that point, they will go to gold, not because they want to, but because they have to.
Right, and in the book Currency Wars by James G. Rickards, there's also some great analysis of systems analysis. Because we're kind of almost in a post-economics world. We're in a world run by systems theory and systems analysis. And if you bring in an SDR, for example, and you try to roll up all the existing debt into a new currency and a new bond market, you're just adding exponentially more debt to the system, which actually increases the risk of chaos exponentially above that. But in the minute left, I wanted to cover something here, which is I just came back from the Kilconomics Economics Festival in Ireland, and we're talking about gold. And of course, the thing you hear all the time is, well, there's not enough gold for there to be a gold standard. And I know you have some thoughts on that, Jim Rickards.
Sure. I've actually I'm working on a piece called the 10 things that everybody believes about gold that are not true. In other words, there's so many sort of falsehoods or canards or sort of cliche responses from the anti-gold people. But look, people say there's not enough gold to support world trade. There's always enough gold. It's just a question of price. There is not enough gold at $1,700 an ounce, but there's plenty of gold at $7,000 an ounce. So the point is, it's not about the quantity of gold. It's about the price you choose to back up the money supply. And this is another very serious point. This was the blunder in 1925. In 1925, in the wake of World War I and the Weimar hyperinflation and reparations and all the problems, the world wanted to go back onto the gold standard. Now, Winston Churchill insisted that they go back at the pre-World War I price, which was about $20.67 an ounce in U.S. dollars. and 4 pounds, little more than 4 pounds in terms of UK sterling. He felt it was the honorable thing to do. Probably his motivations were right, but it was an enormous blunder because so much paper money had been printed during World War I that to go back on the gold standard at the pre-World War I price, you had to take the money supply in England down by 50%. Well, England was in a depression 10 years before the rest of the world. That was highly deflationary. Later in his memoirs, Churchill said that was the worst mistake he ever made. And this was the guy who orchestrated Gallipoli, so he had a couple of mistakes in addition to all his great achievements. So the answer is, it's not just when you go back on the gold standard, you have to think really hard about the price. In 1925, if they had said maybe $50 an ounce instead of $20 an ounce, that might have been mildly inflationary, and we might have avoided the Great Depression. Now, ever since, economists have disparaged gold and marginalized gold and said, well, look, just look at the 1920s, you can see it failed. Well, it did fail in the 1920s, but not because of gold, but because of the price. So when you go back to the gold standard, you've got to get the price right. That's why I recommend actually a commission to study this and make some recommendations. I give a range of values in the book. I don't want to put a stake in the ground over a certain value, Max. I've got the low end about $3,000 an ounce, and at the high end, $44,000 an ounce. And these are not made up numbers. They're all just very simple math ratios of gold quantities to money quantities. For example, do you use M0? Do you use M1? Do you use M2? Do you use all the gold in the world or just the official gold? If you're using official gold, is it just ECB, China, and the U.S., or do we count other countries as well? These are important questions. I don't pretend to have all the right answers, but I know the questions, and they have to be studied. So getting the price right is really important. So when people say there's not enough gold, that's nonsense. It's a question of price.
Jim Rickards, thanks so much for being on the Keiser Report.
Thank you, Max.
All right, and that's going to do it for this edition of the Keiser Report with me, Max Keiser, and Stacy Herbert. I want to thank my guest, James G. Rickards. The book is called Currency Wars. You can follow Mr. Rickards on Twitter at James G. Rickards as well. Pick up this book. And you can follow me on Twitter at Keiser Report or on Facebook. And you can send me an email at keiserreport@rttv.ru. Until next time, this is Max Keiser saying bye, y'all.